Hi, this is my testimony of Scott Lacey. This is the story of how I became a Christian and then got healed of a lifelong mental illness. I've been mentally well for the last 3.5 years. I started at university in 2013 and I did one subject in a 6 month period. I've also worked part time for the last 15 years and done a college certificate in IT. When I was 12 years old, I first heard voices and it occurred to me that I was crazy. The first thing I told myself was, if I tell myself I'm not crazy, then I won't be. I was not acutely ill, but by the time I was 18 or 19, I had deteriorated to the point of being completely out of touch with reality. In 1988, I phoned my grandmother and I knew something was wrong with me. My life was slowly starting to fall apart and I asked my nan what I should do. She said, why don't you go to church? There are nice people there. So I took myself to a local Wollongong Uniting Church. A family took me in and I said the sinner's prayer. I started weeping when I prayed the prayer. I attended that church for about 3 months. One day I was visiting the pastor and he said, what do you want to do with your life? I said, sleep around. He said, that's the devil, I think you'd better leave. So I left out of respect for God. In 1989 I was starting to become acutely mentally ill. I had lost all my friends and my world was becoming an awful mixture of hallucinations, hearing voices, perceiving smells that weren't there. I was unclean and I hadn't had a shower for months. I was living in apartment storage cages beneath a large block of apartments. I was deteriorating into a complete mess. I was then put into hospital for 2 months in Wollongong and Gladesville in Sydney. I was given a lot of medication and I slowly started to come back to reality. I never stopped hearing voices though. I heard voices every day of my life from 1989 until February 2012. I found it I found it difficult to be out in public and I always perceived that when I walked down the street everyone was staring at me and talking about me. I believed that God was faithful to me from the point I said the sinner's prayer until 8 years later when I asked Jesus to help me. During this 8 years from 1989 until 1997, I started out by going to a mental health rehab in Wangaratta, Victoria for a year. Then I moved back to Wollongong with my friend Peter. I was trying to get my old job back at the Port Kembla Steelworks, but my old boss didn't want me back. I lived in supported accommodation in a group home with Peter and a few other mentally ill people. I was quite happy at first and I had a nice girlfriend, Michelle. But then I ended up getting stalked by a girl called Donna. She came to my door one night and said she had been staring in my window at me for the last 2 hours. It was the middle of winter and it was very cold outside. I was very scared of her and I began to do whatever she told me to do, including later marrying her in 1995. I left her within 3 months of our marriage and then for the next 5 years began a yo-yo relationship with her, leaving her and then returning to her over and over. Our relationship was very poor and we argued all the time. I became very angry. I was also struggling with believing I was a transsexual. Finally, at the end of my rope, I was sitting up one night at a boarding house in Leederville, Perth, and I decided I needed Jesus more than being immoral. So I asked Jesus to help me. I just said to him, please help me, Lord. The next day I went to a Koorong Bible bookshop and got myself a Bible and started reading it. The landlady of the boarding house was a Christian also, and she took me to church every Sunday from then on. I remember reading in the Bible, in the book of James, the sick among you shall call for the elders of the church to anoint you with oil, and the sick will recover and be forgiven of many sins. I believed that if I did this, called for the elders to anoint me with oil and pray for me, that I would be healed of schizophrenia, but I never acted on it until 3 years later in 2000. In 2000, I had moved back to my hometown, Albury. Donna had divorced me and I was attending the Christian Fellowship Centre, a church in Keyworth Street, Albury. I asked the pastor, Mark, to anoint me and pray for me to be healed of schizophrenia. He did so, but he prayed for me by himself. The book of James says elders plural, with an S in elders, so I never believed I would be completely healed. I really wanted him to get a few of the other church elders to pray with him when he anointed me. I was partially healed and I started attending college 5 days later, and although I had attempted college 9 times in the previous 11 years, I attended and passed the course, earning myself a certificate. And although I had about 40 jobs in the 11 years running up to 2000, and I never kept them for more than 2 or 3 weeks. After my partial healing in 2000, I got part-time work as a pizza driver and held the job for 8 months. Also, my mental health nurse started reducing my medication to a really small dose, and I've been on a small dose for the last 15 years. I'm still on a small dose of medication now, but I haven't heard voices at all for 3.5 years, and I heard them every day from 1989 until 2012, 23 years. After I finished the 8 months work at Pizza Hut, I started working for one other shop as a pizza driver, and then I left and worked for Rebel's Pizza in Albury, and then I was there for 12 years part-time work. The reason I got totally healed in February 2012 was I went back to my pastor and specifically asked him to get together 2 or more elders and anoint me with oil and pray for me for healing from schizophrenia. He did this, and I haven't had a symptom ever since. I'm attending church every week, sometimes twice a week. I usually go to a prayer meeting and the service on Sundays. I applied to go to university at ANU, Australian National University, last year, and I was accepted. I deferred for the first 12 months, and I began my degree in software engineering in February 2016. I was extremely scared about making such a bold move, me feeling like a bum off the street, and believing as I did that I would never make a contribution to society. But when I googled Healed from Schizophrenia by Jesus, I came across Andrew Goodwin's testimony, and now I know I'm not alone. This has been my greatest encouragement. God bless Andrew, and God bless you. Thank you.